and you just have to accept that for the
I'm happy to accept that.
exactly terms and conditions apply when you come on the
Yeah,
podcast.
that's fair enough.
How you doing,
I
man?
think I'm all good. Yeah, I'm tired, but I have been since Bowie died.
Ah,
Which it's not related, but it just happens to be a good time reference of when.
drink.
Um, I'm
Any?
comfortable on I'm comfortable doing this. Yeah, I'm not comfortable and happy in my day-to-day life, but I don't think that wasn't the question, was
No, that's not a requirement for the podcast. If anything,
it?
this podcast
No.
requires you to be slightly unhappy
At
based on the name.
very least, I need to be suffering. Yeah, that'd be great.
You got to be in there. But yeah, if you're ready to roll, we can dive straight in, Kieran.
I'm very ready to roll.
Clear my throat briefly. I went for a
That's
run
okay.
run this morning because I've got like the driest throat in the.
I sort of stopped. I stopped running. I got really good at it, and then I
Mm,
just got really pudgy and weird. And then now it's like I don't. I keep wanting to run again, but every time I
mm.
go outside, it just makes you realize that I'd much rather be staying inside eating crisps,
I do it kind
and
of.
that's tough.
It's more of like a form of self-punishment these days, where
Yeah,
it's it's like I wake up and I'm like, okay, we should run this week. We should at least once this week we should run,
yeah,
and we do that because we're a terrible person. So
yeah. It's like Catholic guilt, isn't it?
yeah,
It's that kind of thing of like I need to at least be suffering right now.
what do atheists do for guilt? They run. Let's be real. They run.
I take up jogging.
They do. Welcome to the podcast, Karen.
Thank you very
Lovely to.
much.
We obviously we know each other in real life, hence
We do.
the casual introduction to ourselves. You know, as briefly as I've met you, I think I've actually met you maybe in person five, six times.
Yeah, but I've for the listener slash watcher, I met your brother first, and you
You
guys
did.
have the exact same mannerisms and face.
You are
That
my
it
brother's friend.
became
I've
yeah
co-opted you. Yeah.
yeah, it's quite easy to get along with you because it's just like okay, so what does Longhead Martin feel about this? It's just like yeah, no worries.
What does
Like I'm
long
pretty
haired,
sure like
slightly hipster, more hipster man?
yeah. What does Martin, if he was really into the Grateful Dead, feel about this?
Actually, I love it. For anyone listening who doesn't know, Martin is my brother, and I do an episode with him at the very beginning of the year. So this
Yeah,
this kind of tracks on from that. But for
yeah.
those who don't know, having not met you in real life, who are you? What are you all about? Is my first question.
Um, well, I stoked on the first one. That's awful.
I
Um,
know.
no,
That's
I'd
usually the one
say
that's usually the one which gets
yeah,
people. So that's why I've now merged it in. It's less who are you because that's existential, terrifying.
yeah,
I prefer if we follow with like what are you all about? What are you into? You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say I'm Kieran. I'm liberally describe myself as a comedian,
Uh-huh.
which is what I quite. That's the main thing I've done and want to do, which is kind of which is probably the thing it's going to be the thing I'll talk about. It'd be great if it's just like I love comedy, but anyway, the Vietnam War that was fucked up. Start to finish awful.
We could go through it, but no, yeah. I mean, I know you from the comedy stuff as well. I know that you
Yeah.
have a want to be a comedian. I was trying to think if you're the first comedian I've had on the show. Maybe.
It'd be nice, but I mean, it depends. You're gonna get a better one at some point, and you have to class that as the first.
No, I feel like there is the significance in the first of something. If you're the first comedian, you're the first comedian.
I'd love to be the first. Yeah, I'm keeping that then.
Yeah, we can keep it solid. Who knows? If I get someone who's more well known, I'm not going to say better because better isn't as known, but more well known, that just encourages you to get more well known and come back on.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll slip you
we're
in.
doing it just from this moment alone. It'll be my like evolution story.
You've been doing comedy what, like a couple of years now? Two, three?
No, I'd say it's probably realistically only been about a year.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because it's also like, especially when you start, it's like the hardest thing to get into
Hmm.
because it's kind of, and obviously it's not like to say that everything else is shit in comparison, but no, like starting off is awful because for starters is a weird crossover saying like I think you instinctively like try and be funny with people, but it
Mhm.
takes like a really special kind of arsehole to be like, I'm so funny. In fact, I think I'm going to try and monetize this for a bit. Or like even just in any sense of it, it's just like I'm going to now start doing this to people who've never met me, who don't, who aren't going to know me afterwards, aren't going to have anything like that. The idea of starting and doing that is a really weird step into it. So can I remember like my first ever one? It was like it's also a weird thing of like you don't really know. So just like go straight from the beginning.
Mhm.
It's like okay, I now want to start doing stand up. It's like where do you go? There's not like
Yeah.
it's not like for instance if you want to take a hobby or anything like that. It's kind of like or you want to learn an instrument, you find friends and jam kind of thing.
Mhm.
The only thing you can do with comedy is like I need to now things I find funny to go stand on a stage and do it.
Yeah.
And it's like such a big jump from just being like I'm just casually making friends laugh or I'm trying to think of things that'll make people laugh or even like to a degree like posting things of like oh this will be funny
Yeah.
and then just to then go to a stage is the weirdest one. The first one I ever did I tried to get drunk before it because it was like to quell some nerves and
Okay.
it was which is it sounds like it'd be a disaster.
It sounds like the worst idea. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, 100%. No, if you someone had advised you like what do you do before this and like you want to get so drunk that you can barely stand up. But I was trying to drink and I was that nervous it like just wasn't touching me.
No.
Like I could usually it's like you feel like there's gonna be some sort of quell of
Hmm.
fear or of anxiety and it just didn't happen. I just remember being stood on stage. But I can remember every minute of it, which is like just being there and it was
Yeah.
like that was wild. But yeah, so starting off getting into it's really difficult because there's no set space for it either. There's not kind of like even open mic stuff is
Yeah.
kind of I'm not sure it's kind of the same where you are. I mean, I imagine like kind of New Yorkish area has a lot more stuff on, but like we're kind of doing it in a small kind of city.
Yeah.
So realistically, there's not this thing where it's just like, yeah, just come up and do it. There's not a comedy club. There's not like things. So it's all
Hmm.
like the back rooms of pubs and various bars and stuff, which also makes for a really interesting audience because there's a big chunk of them who have no intention of being there. Which is like it's wild. You could do something that's like your dream, and you could just be stood around people who could not give a fuck, like completely apathetic. Just like, oh, I
Yeah.
just went in this room.
It is kind of one of those things, and I mean, I'm obviously from small towns.
Yeah,
We know the struggle, right? We know that
yeah,
thing of being like, all right, I'm interested in this creative thing or this thing which
yeah,
isn't local to me. Right, that's basically all I have because
yeah,
there's nothing to me to connect to anything. I can't go to another city because I can't afford it. I can't,
yeah,
you know, drive somewhere because I'm maybe 16, 18. What do I do at the time? And you kind of you end up like building your own resources in a way.
yeah, 100%. So
Yeah.
that was kind of that'll lead me neatly onto my thing. No, so I was like when I started, it was like it was just trying to find anywhere to do it.
Hmm.
That becomes quite difficult, and then it's also like I don't know how you describe it. It's literally just like the thing of getting on stage for the first time is just terrifying. But then afterwards, it's like trying to find opportunities, and even then, they're like, if you don't drive, that's quite
Hmm.
difficult. If you kind of find this thing of like, there's a few places that do a night,
Yeah.
and they're also stretched really thin because everyone else kind of wants to do it.
Yeah.
You kind of find it's like you're not just like you kind of read like sort of comedians and like I mean, it's much more of a New York thing, but it was like
Hmm.
just like going to a spot and then
Yeah.
doing a set and then going to a different place and doing a set. And it's like you just keep doing that. It's like you can just travel around and do it.
Yeah.
Even if you're making no money, there's just opportunities to at least try it. With this one, it's like you have to maybe message someone in a few weeks. It's like, yeah, we have a night on. You can be on this one, not the next one, but the one
Yeah.
after that. It's like, okay, cool. So I'm so ready for this by May. So it's like it becomes difficult to write as well. For instance, like if I remember kind of like there was a phase I can't remember what was happening. I think it was something to do with it was that point where the Royals were kind of like fudging Kate, just saying she was
Okay.
like, oh yeah, she's out
Yeah.
here and she was like a woman in dark glasses, and it was just like
Yes. Yes. When they
I'd
were
kind of
weekend
written
at
some
Bernizing.
yeah, they were like
Yeah.
fully just propping her up and just being like, yeah, she's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bits of that. I kind of written some bits that were like I found funny, and I
Mm.
just remember thinking that this is pointless because I'm not gonna be able to tell this until like
Yeah.
another point. And I think it was like 3 days before because the story was still kind of knocking around.
Hmm.
so I kind of had this stuff that was like there's more developments and stuff, so you kind of start building it, and then it was like I think it was like the next or like yeah 2 or 3 days before, just because announced that she had cancer and was hiding it.
Yeah.
And not that she suffered more because of that, but the idea of me being like, well, that's all just destroyed now. It's like you can't say, like, oh, wouldn't this be fun? I was like, oh, fuck.
It's terrible when
Which
real
is,
world events ruin
yeah, do you know what I
your
mean?
plans. Like,
It's like, again, I know I'm not the victim in that story, but
yes.
if we're just saying what happened to me, I was a little bit screwed out of that one.
It's that there's that like really old internet meme of the amount of things which coincidentally included like some sort of disaster being included
Yeah,
in artwork or music or somewhere, or like a film in a scene in a film, and having to recut that entire scene because something happened in the
yeah.
public, and like this is going to cost us millions. Yes, but millions of people died.
Yeah.
Like,
I think
which
Jackie Chan was meant to do like he was meant to be he was meant to do a film where he's a window cleaner on the World Trade Center.
right. Yeah.
Like that whole project got scrapped.
There was the one which I always remember is the one from Lilo and Stitch, which there's like a final scene in Lilo and Stitch where they're in like a spaceship and they're like everything's going
Yeah.
wrong and they're flying through. That was originally a passenger jet and
Yes.
it
Yeah.
flew through like a skyscraper.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are we doing now?
I mean, in their defense, no one predicted that.
No,
That wasn't like Lilo
you
and
can't
Stitch. It was
predict the reality of the world and the chaos that is everything.
no. So yeah, it's like it becomes like difficult to write things. So it's kind of everything you have to write it starts to become really personal.
Yeah.
Because it's just like I for instance I kind of speak about having anxiety and
Mhm.
like being pretty like a kind of autism thing.
Mhm.
And it's quite difficult. Like that's something that's only going to be with me, and it's
Mhm.
like that's not going anywhere. So it's like these are my core jokes because these aren't gonna I'm not gonna be fixed by the time I'm back on.
Yeah.
But then it's like it becomes quite difficult. For instance, if you go to there's some places I've been like doing comedy that I wouldn't feel safe with a firearm. There
Right.
was there was one I can't remember where it was. I feel like it might have actually been Lincoln,
Okay.
which is actually a really nice place. But there was this like
There's an
where
undercurrent
it
in Lincoln they
was,
don't talk about.
yeah, the serious edgy comedy underworld. No, it was this place that was like it was it was like in a council estate.
Hmm.
Um and it was kind of like I don't know how to describe it, but like every single person on the street was on heroin. Like
Yeah.
and I've not even like people say like, oh, it was rough, and then it's just like there was some youths hanging outside a shop. This was literally like there was a YMCA kind of halfway house just
Mhm.
like across the street, and then there's this big block of flats, and then next door there was like a treatment center for like methadone and stuff like that. And then just in the middle of it was this escape room, like for some reason picked there, and they had like a theater on top, and it was a guy who's like was partnered and it was also a comedian, so he started having like comedians on, and like that was one of the weirdest gigs I've ever done, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was quite it's quite wild to see the places you'll like end up doing this because it's
Yeah.
kind of like it brings back to that thing of like there's no set space for it.
Yeah.
But so essentially when you're kind of the level starting, it's just shoehorned wherever they'll take it.
Yeah.
And so
It's
you go to play, yeah,
yeah. I was just gonna say like it's one of those things of it's interesting kind of meeting you at this stage, right?
yeah,
For like because I feel like most people when they run into someone and someone's like, "Oh, hey, I'm a comedian," it's usually like 2 or 3 years down the line,
yeah,
right? And they're either trying it and trying it and trying it, got a following on Instagram or TikTok or whatever,
yeah,
and they've collected that, or they're doing it legitimately and it's like their bread and butter. And
yeah,
I'm like, so you're in that real in between gap.
yeah. I'm that point where it's literally like this is you. I don't know if you could call it. I've been paid to do things before or
Right.
like stuff like that, but I'm still very much at the point where it's like this is just a hobby,
Hmm.
and it's like it's difficult. So it's like I ended up starting like a comedy night just because it got like sick of. Oh, this is gonna sound mean. There's a
We can
certain
be
like
mean, we just can't slander.
yeah,
That's all I'm saying.
I won't slander.
Yeah.
there's a weird vein of like because older guys kind of run a comedy scene because they've
Right.
been doing
Yeah.
it for longer and they kind of have disposable income because
Hmm.
they, you know, because they grew up when it was like you could
Because they
like
have
say, yeah,
assets. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically that's the thing. So it's
Yeah.
like anyone who kind of runs it is like an old white guy,
Yeah.
and with the best will in the world, some of them are the least funny human beings ever because they're still in that kind of thread of like comedy evolves,
Hmm.
always kind of has, you know. So if you look at the stuff that I mean, it's not like shocking to say like if you look back at any kind of thing, there's
Yeah.
things that were taboo, there's things that weren't taboo, there was like where people talk, it's all kind of
Yeah.
things that kind of evolves, but they're all still in that kind of like like my wife's fat kind of jokes. And
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
always a bit like you kind of hate it.
Yeah.
I've lost my tangent here. Is the thing. Yeah, so it's like I ended up starting a night because it was really difficult for like especially younger comedians
Yeah.
who are kind of a bit weird or a bit like sort of talk about. I mean, politics has always kind of been a thread in think of it as like a thread in comedy, but I found like a lot of the older guys would just do like one-liners about like,
Hmm.
"Oh, Rishi Sunak can get a sky dish," and it was just like, oh, this is like I hate this.
Yeah. It's there's like a couple of bits there where it's like so weirdly you've just kind of triggered a memory for me of so I was on Facebook recently and there was a clip from can't remember what it was from something it's like Faulty Towers or like original old English comedy as I
Yeah,
would call it, right? And as I always do the same thing, which I shouldn't do, is go into the comments, which is
yeah,
always a
that's the
mistake on
worst.
Facebook. Worst thing to do. Because there wasn't anything offensive or bad about the clip, right? It was one of those like it could be a joke from today. It could be
Yeah,
like an easy joke from today, and I was like, oh, this would be interesting just to see what the comments are. And then the one I always look for is the one which says, oh, this would never get shown today,
yeah.
and
People love saying that.
they love saying it, and it's interesting because I think the mentality you have, well, they have with like a comedy night is they're very much sticking to that like one liner because
Yeah,
they think in somehow they've convinced themselves that you couldn't do that in a modern setting. And
yeah,
like watching this clip, I was like, well, this is just Mitchell and Webb,
yeah.
right? It's just a sketch.
Everything,
Yeah,
yeah, everything just follows off from what was. There's nothing really been
yeah,
groundbreaking. There's a few shows, obviously not a slight thing, but it's like there is everything follows the formula. It's like
yeah,
I think it was Chris Rock said a thing of like Henny Youngman has to have something to do with comedy.
yeah,
Even if you do it now, it's like, yeah, he did like cheesy, like kind of my,
yeah,
like where like wife wants me to take us somewhere that she's never been before. It's like, try the kitchen. Like that's still
yeah,
set up punch kind of thing. And that's what comedy has to be. If
yeah.
you just like a weird voice and you just ramble, it's like, it doesn't work.
No, yeah. And there's a few of
But
those.
yeah, yeah, no,
There's
I
a few
did.
of
I did a gig with a guy. I feel like oh, this is bad. I feel like he might have stopped purely because there's no way he could maintain this.
right.
But
Okay.
he went on stage as he called himself the drunk Viking, and
Right.
he's never really explained why he was a drunk Viking. It was just an awkward guy who looked like an IT technician
Right.
who had a Viking helmet, and he didn't. If I was to describe his act, it was literally like you had you were legally obliged to have seven comedians on that night. One of
Okay.
them dropped out, and you just turned to your friend and said, "Hey, I need you to get on for 5 minutes. You don't have to be funny. You just have to stand there for 5 minutes. I need you to do this for me." And he went on stage, and he was just like he was hammered, and he just kept talking about like, he was like, "Oh, I thought I was Danish, so I'm a Viking of a Viking." It's just like it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And I remember laughing at it, just being like, I felt awful at laughing because it was only me, just broadly enjoying the hell out of it. But it was insane. But it's yeah, there's like this different kind of acts that you definitely get to like.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, there's definitely like and I think this isn't just like comedy. I actually think this is kind of like it's an inherent thing with most events in especially in
Yeah,
small towns, small cities, right? Like you're saying, like New York has so many things going on. If you have something, they will that you can go see it. Like,
yeah,
you'll find a night for it. You'll find an open mic where you can play. So you never really know what you're gonna get, and that's good and bad in its own sense.
yeah,
But local nights, especially in the UK, it becomes very much like they have to cater to one genre, one
yeah,
style, because they're so worried about no footfall,
yeah,
right? They're so worried about it failing. Whereas New York's like, well, yeah, there's like 20 of these. They can all fail. for one night
Yeah.
because there'll be 20 people next week and come
Yeah,
along
there's
to the
always
thing.
going to be someone who wanders in.
Yeah, you can always backfill an audience.
Yeah.
Because like you say, like in the that situation, there's always people who want stuff because the population is there. Whereas in
Yeah.
the UK, it's like, well, yeah, but half these people didn't know there was a comedy night on. They came for a drink,
Yeah.
and they just happened. They got a bit concerned because someone set up a mic, and now they don't know what they're in for.
I know. It's one of the things you get there and there's people like having conversation. They bring their kids and they just came for a meal and then they
Yeah,
just sat in the back room and you're just gonna try and like tell any sort of joke and he's looking over at this woman who's like, kid's got an iPad, just doing it. It's just like, yeah, this isn't what I expected, but
yeah,
still gonna do it.
yeah. I mean, I guess it's kind of like to if we try to lock down a topic for today. I mean, comedy's a broad
Yeah,
topic, right?
I,
Do you have a
I'm kind of in
specific aspect of comedy that you're
I'd
interested
say
in?
it's probably it's starting to getting into like to progressing and finding what you
Hmm.
enjoy. That'd be my kind of thing I
That's the
talk
kind
about.
of
I do ramble a little bit, but that's kind
that's the whole point of the show. But
of
all right, we can start there. I always feel like a therapist when I'm running it like this kind of style.
yeah.
But
To be fair, this is comedy is a thing that could be knocked out with a decent course of therapy. So by the end of this, I may have given up on my dream.
no, I feel like if anything, therapy just gives you the fodder for your comedy because you need an area to vent from your therapist. You go to your therapist
Yeah,
to vent about life, and then you escape your therapy to go vent about your therapist, and that's the
yeah,
cycle of the system. But I guess if we're talking about starting comedy, my initial
yeah,
question is kind of like you mentioned it there of obviously as a person you have some level of anxiety.
yeah.
Why in the world would you want to put yourself in the lion's cage of
I've.
performing in front of people?
Do you know what? That's one of the things I think about the most.
Yeah.
That like I think it's one of the things I've always like. I feel like some people are gifted where they kind of have that body that like body or mind that just makes them do something. So
Mm.
it's like you look at like I got really into basketball because I watched like a Jordan documentary because he was like he couldn't have been more built for like doing that. It's like his whole mentality and everything
Yeah.
else. I seem to be the opposite where my body's physically built against me to do any of the things I wanted to do. Like when I was younger, I got really like pudgy and ballooned out and got fat, and that stopped me from meeting women.
Mhm.
I've always had like terrible, like everything I think looks good makes me look like an idiot. Sorry, I've never dressed well. I started like loving comedy, and then I went to get on stage and realized that I suffer from like I found out I suffer from panic attacks on a fucking comedy club stage.
Jesus Christ.
Like, could you
Okay.
think of a worse
Worst
place?
place. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started like I guess I don't know why. There's always been kind of thing of like the comedians I enjoyed the most were the guys who there's guys who can do it and are great and they should be doing it. And there's also people who they could be doing hundreds of other things. They'd probably be
Mhm.
successful at, like working in an office or even like being a teacher or doing all these kind of like any sort of job, but they kind of need to do comedy. Like that's the
Mhm.
thing they need to do. And it's like whether they like whether they can or can't, they just need to. And they
Yeah.
need to find a way to do it and get better at it and then to keep doing it. And it's just like it has to be like a physical like literally like say the word calling, but like that's the kind of
Yeah.
thing where it becomes that. And I describe myself in that kind of vein of it, which doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I'm perfect or the greatest one you'll ever see. But
No.
it just started off with like when I first saw someone do comedy,
Mm.
it like blew my fucking mind.
Right.
It was like you remember you first see it, and it's just like so. This is just like a guy stood here telling jokes, and it's like I can't even figure out like what this. I thought like he's just stood there for the first time and done it, and then when you
Yeah.
see comedians again, you see the same thing. And he's got a set, and it's like oh, so he's just doing like a routine.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy. Like I'd love to do that. And then it's like you're out with your friends, and it's like I would always kind of think of things of like stuff that I wanted to say that I thought like
Mhm.
this would be like a good joke, and it's like kind of writing as I sort of like points of that, and then you start to get to that point of like right, so now I want to do it on a stage.
Yeah.
I've kind of lost my point again. I ramble a
No, I
bit.
mean that makes sense. Of like, so I was a phrase I use a lot, especially on
Yeah,
this show, and because I obviously speak to quite a lot of like creative people, artistic people.
yeah,
There is a running thread between
yeah,
all of these people, and it is that we're compulsively creative, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah. It's
I
that.
never think of
Sorry,
it as
that was
like. yeah, I never think it as a calling. I think of it, this is pure compulsion. Like
Yeah,
you can do any job in the world, and you're gonna find some way to make it slightly different to what was written down as that job is, right? You can work in a
yeah,
kitchen, but you're gonna be like, oh, well, what if we did food different to how food's usually?
yeah,
And it's that kind of thing of there is a compulsive creativeness, which becomes a bit of a curse because, like you say,
yeah,
you your body, your mind tell you this is all wrong, right?
yeah,
We should not be doing this. But there's this like
absolutely.
cube in your head which goes, oh no, but if we don't do this, we'll die. Um,
Yeah,
so we need that outlet.
it is that thing that was sort of saying. So like the anxiety of doing it. So it's like
Yeah.
I kept wanting to do it, and then it
Mhm.
was like I would be out thinking, and it's really safe around friends because if a joke bombs, your friends still love you afterwards. It's like kind of
Wait, that's
it's like, oh, you
true.
say something that's too far. It's like kind of that's nice.
Yeah.
So it's like this weird kind of jump with when I got on stage. That's when I kind of first discovered like how bad
Mm.
my anxiety was because I've always kind of felt it. So it's like I did the first one, sort of said to you, and I got drunk and
Mhm.
couldn't quell my nerves. But there was this weird point when I first got on stage. It was like it was too much to stop now,
Yeah.
and I got through that one really well. It was actually like a really good set, and it was.
Mhm.
I think I often I it's one of the things that wouldn't have mattered. Like I got on stage and did it,
Yeah.
and it got laughs. I remember the first time you feel that is like a smack high, where
Yeah.
it's just like I've like done that thing.
Yeah.
Like I'm literally everything I saw, even if it's just like
Mhm.
to a small room, wherever it
Yeah.
is, I've that thing that I worshipped as a kid, I'm
Mhm.
now doing. Any form of it is just like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So then to do that, and then you kind of want to start doing more. And that's when I kind of discovered like how bad my anxiety was. Like I went up and did another one. I did one in New York, that open mic you went to.
I
And
did.
that
I
was
was
kind of
there.
the first time. Yeah. So I was jet lagged. I was really suffering from anxiety. I was not in the best place.
No.
I remember like I was on the subway there. I was like sweating. Like I
Yeah.
literally had like so when I got up there first time, that's when I realized I started having panic attacks.
Right.
And I did one when I got back to England
Yeah.
and I started went for one. And I had a Fitbit at the time. And
Right.
it was like I was sat in the car driving up there.
Yeah.
And then when I got on stage and I had a look and it was the heart rate was like at the point of sprinting.
Right.
Like it was
Yeah.
literally like I could not calm down. And then when you get in that point, when you stand there and
Yeah.
you're on stage, and it's like I think I was lucky with the first time I went on stage. I told a joke and they laughed.
Right.
And I went on this the other times and there was no like you tell your first joke and it doesn't get a laugh or it gets like a little
Mhm.
bit titter. That was that like made me completely shut down. Whereas like I
Right.
now can no longer do this because it's like I just needed that first reassurance.
Yeah.
So that's when that's when I discovered like how badly the anxiety was and like having panic
Mhm.
attacks and stuff. Like I literally had to like stand out of the way and it was fucking
Yeah.
awful. And then that became like, all right, so this is what happens to you if you try this. So
Yeah.
now you need to find a way of making this work and you need to kind of do it. And then so I started like doing it where it's difficult as well because you can't practice it.
Yeah. I was just thinking that, like,
Yeah,
one of the vivid things I remember from the show you had was, for context of the audience, it was a small show, open mic, New York. Most of the rest of the audience were comedians,
I think
if
they
not,
entirely
yeah.
were. Yeah,
Apart from the
I
people we
think it
brought
was.
with us,
Yeah,
yeah, the rest of the audience were comedians. So you're literally watching someone write art
yeah,
live because there is no way to practice this.
no,
Because if you practice this with friends, they'll laugh because
yeah,
they want to encourage you and they want to help you. But it's one of the few professions where there is no way to sample this. You have to go up. And one of the things I remember was like the amount of people on the stage who were like, says a joke, gets a minor laugh, like, okay, that didn't work. And you're
yeah. Just like jot it down.
taking notes, mentally jotting down. It's like, okay, that didn't work. Let's see what works next. And I find that fascinating, especially as a person who makes art, who removes himself completely from the process. Right. I don't want to
Yeah,
work in lifetime in front of people. And yet you
no.
have no choice.
You have no choice, and then it's what's even worse if, like, say if you created anything that was like a bit
Yeah.
of art,
Yeah.
like, and you put it out, and someone says like, "Oh, that's shite,"
Hmm.
but there's always going to be enough of like what you did do was art. You
Yeah.
know, you created something and it might not have been someone's taste, but you actually designed something and physically did it.
Hmm.
If you do comedy and then go out and don't get a laugh, it's not the fucking thing it is. It stopped becoming the thing you were trying to make it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think there's any other, even like a bad song is still technically a song. A
Yeah.
bad picture is still technically a picture. A bad
Yeah.
t-shirt, a bad anything is still technically the thing it is. If you go up and tell a joke and no one laughs, it's
Yeah.
no longer the one thing you wanted it to be.
Yeah. It's
And then
still a sketch.
you're discovering that like in front of people is like it's the fucking worst. There is like no redeeming part of it where it's like,
Yeah.
and the only thing you can do is just go like, well, that didn't work, or like, do I need to change
Hmm.
that? Is that something that I think could work? Am I just in the wrong place?
Yeah.
And it's like, then you can get to the point where I've seen people start to blame like it's
Oh,
like, oh, they weren't really my crowd, and it's like, yeah, but
yeah.
anyone can be your crowd. They have to kind of get that thing of making it work. Like it's happened like on a vein of things before, where it's like I've done jokes about like autism to a room full of like elderly people who definitely believe it's just like a conspiracy.
Yeah.
It's just
Ne
like,
they've
well, this
never
is
heard
going
of it because
nowhere.
they were just like, oh
Yeah,
no, Craig down the street, he's just a little weird.
yeah,
Like, he's a weird kid.
yeah. It's just like it starts to become that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing of doing something when you're trying to rehearse it or practice it, there's just having no way of doing it is the worst. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that kind of triggered the anxiety the most. But then it's like what I started to do is instead of I like wrote things that I thought were good and I'd kind of done enough of them and I you see enough comedy and you know what's made friends laugh or like kind of
Yeah.
groups of when you're in amongst like their friends being their friends and you say things that makes them laugh.
Yeah.
And it's kind of you know enough innately about it to do it.
Yeah.
So my preparation to get on stage and be a comedian was learning to control anxiety,
Yeah.
which was like it's quite weird. Like I wasn't really focused on writing jokes. It was like, right, so chamomile tea, valerian root, that's really good.
Yeah.
And then it's like to get this thing of like, if I can just keep my heart rate down,
Yeah.
I can do this.
It's interesting seeing how comedians develop their kind of coping mechanisms.
Yeah,
Like I watched the work with Bo Burnham and who,
yeah,
much like you, discovered he had panic attacks on stage. It was like,
yeah,
this is where I'm discovering it, and he's doing it with an audience of like 1,000 people or something. And then there's like Mitch Hedberg who used to wear
yeah,
sunglasses on stage, and I remember seeing it, thinking as a kid, thinking, oh, that guy's just pretty cool. He's got style.
yeah,
Yeah, you're watching it, and then you watch an interview. He's like, yeah, he wears rose tinted glasses because he's probably a little high and also doesn't see the audience that way. And I was like, that's
yeah. He likes to
genius.
physical like there's clips if you watch him, you can see he's got his eyes shut.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
think you think like I was always kind of like, oh, he's probably just like a bit
yeah,
like like you said, like a bit high, but like no, he's literally like clamping his eyes shut out of fear.
yeah.
And it's
And
also like you have to kind of look natural doing it, which is
yes,
crazier because
yeah,
it's like I'm having the worst time. I mean, it'd be literally like that buddy at work has just gone through a breakup who doesn't talk about his feelings, and it's just
yeah,
like, yeah, no, I'm absolutely fine. You can just see like you're having the worst time, and that's fine.
yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
interesting.
it's like, sorry,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say like trying to make someone laugh where you're literally
Yeah,
you can feel like if you show 1 ounce of fear,
yeah,
they're not gonna find it funny because, and I mean, there's the to a degree they'll laugh a little bit, like, but then it
hmm,
starts to get like you'll get a sympathy laugh if you're like shaking. At
yes,
which point, no one wants to like. Who's ever been like, "Oh, it was great. I felt so sympathetic for the guy.
yeah.
It was a great night. Had by all."
I went to this comedy show and it was great. There was so much pathos, like it
Yeah,
was like absolute. I was just the thing which kind of struck me there was just like it's interesting of like I think of jokes in a social situation
yeah,
as a way of dealing with anxiety, right?
yeah,
Like in a crowd of people, maybe people you don't necessarily know that well, even your close friends, when things get a little dark, a little awkward, you as a group make a joke
yeah,
to deal with that anxiety. Yet comedy as a concept is putting you in an anxious situation and you've
yeah.
got pre-written jokes.
It is like trying to like it throws you in a thing of like right now you've got this little arsenal. You need to fight
Yeah,
your way out of whatever corner you're in,
yeah.
and it's yeah,
It's the fight or flight response, but it's on stage.
yeah. No, it's weird. It's just like you start yeah, it's having the worst body and mind for it,
Mm.
but it's that thing again of like I don't want to do this, like I need to. Like this
Yeah,
is the thing I have always wanted to do and I've always respect. And it's like yeah, it's that thing of wanting to. So what's even worse when you see someone who's like I would say bad at it,
Hmm.
but like with supreme confidence,
Yeah.
like
I, I
that hurts.
I think that's I think again I feel like that's this there's a running track of like I feel like that's also very true of just like musicians. Like you go to see
Yeah,
a lot of music shows. There's always going to be a band who think they're the shit,
yeah,
but they're just terrible, right? They like
yeah,
the stage presence is there in the sense of they're like, yeah, we're on stage with the greatest band ever, and then you listen,
yeah.
you're like, I don't
Mm,
know, it's kind
sorry.
of yeah, sorry, man. Like it's not my maybe it's not my cup of tea, and you kind of make
Yeah,
excuses for them, like you say, like when
it's
you
like
give like a pity laugh.
you get like that thing in comedy though, because I find that everyone's kind of saying the same thing, or at least
Right.
is like everyone's quite supportive. So
Yeah.
you never. There's always some guy who's trying to do it as like you get like a few people. Some people do it, they've never been told they're not funny,
Right.
and they're just trying it out and doing it. There's also a lot of really awkward, damaged people
Hmm.
who are now trying to be like, this is going to be my thing to get me out of my
Yeah.
space. I struggle to talk to people, so I'm going to do comedy, and that's going to make
Hmm.
me like likable.
Hmm.
And they're always nice, but they're never great. And it's like and afterwards, but everyone talks to them and they want them to be like, kind of like, yeah, you should try it and keep going. It's like, it's always been a really supportive community for it.
Yeah.
But then there's some people who have just like, I kind of touched on that thing of like the guys who have their own night who
Yeah.
kind of like, they won't ever be told they're not funny because they supply a space for people to do it.
Yeah.
And they're always kind of like the host of it and stuff like that. Like I remember I did one that was, I went on the stage, did my thing, and it actually like got loads of laughs and it was
Hmm.
great. And I was still a bit shaky, but came off afterwards and he was just like, "Hey, like, do you mind if I give you some advice?" And I was just like, "Yeah, totally, man. Like, I'm not going to be that guy.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm not perfect, whatever it is."
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, just like way too many fucks in there. Like, you said fuck too many times." But like, I kind of have it as like a tick, and it's also how I
Yeah.
speak. Like,
Yeah.
I grew up in a shithole. I was like, so I was just kind of like, "All right, cool." Like he said, "Yeah, if you want to just like tone down the amount of fucks you said, I think you'd really like have a good
Yeah.
chance of like thinking." I was like, kind of felt like, all right. And then he went on after me and got an acoustic guitar and started singing a song about like putting a finger up someone's bum and like rhyming it with cum. And I just felt like
Right.
going, "Hey man, don't do that. Don't do that ever again, because you'll get a laugh, but it's fucking like it's heartbreaking watching someone try to write something that's just like I'm gonna rhyme like just then go up and do it
Yeah.
afterwards." I was like, "Yeah, please don't ever do that."
Yeah. No,
Like
yeah.
that's offensive to me. Like you didn't try at all. You just knew like if I mention bum and come and play this guitar, I'm actually gonna do all
Yeah.
right.
It is one of those kind of tragic things of like as much as the challenges of like you say of like writing a joke in the first
Yeah,
place, like that's a challenge. That it almost seems like the bigger challenge is getting past the barrier of just locations and people.
yeah,
Because like you say, like you're always gonna have one of those venues and you're always gonna have one of those locations, which is run by four guys who happen to, have a space. Maybe they're friends with
yeah,
the owner in some way, and they've been doing it for years, and they're always going to have advice on how to make it, even though they've been doing it for 20 years and they've never made
yeah,
it, right? And that is so disorientating to anyone starting out
yeah,
and discouraging.
yeah. It's really tough, especially because they're like it's almost like semi-wielded, where it's like
Mm,
they have this space to get everyone in, and then it's
yeah,
like you can't go there again for another couple of months because there's other people to rotate round. So it's kind
yeah,
of like you end up having to like I don't know there's a disingenuity with it, where it's like you want to kind of like talking to them at things, and it's just like it's
yeah,
trying to make sure you have a space to maintain to be creative because it's something you really want to do.
yeah,
But it does become really like tough. That was like the thing of why I end up starting like a night myself. It's like to also be one of those people. No,
yeah.
it's like it was like because I kept going in places that just like were not like especially like kind of younger comedians. Like I kind of
Hmm.
mentioned, young comedians who kind of like talk about like set of anxiety,
Yeah,
social issues, like that kind of stuff. It never really worked in the venues it was in because they were literally looking for like knob gags and like
yeah,
racist shit. Like that was like thing. So I found the first thing I did was find a space that actually fitted the kind of comedians that would be on,
yeah,
which I felt like people didn't really do that. It was literally like, have you got a back room in your pub? Like, sweet,
yeah.
I'm gonna turn up now,
Hmm.
and then like, that's gonna be the thing.
Yeah,
So we found a space that really, really worked. and then we started like putting it on, and then it's like we also start doing kind of the artwork around it to be a little bit weird as well. And it's like I
Hmm.
actually really wanted to care about it and doing it, and then it started to get. It's kind of like, I mean, I know I'm biased, but like every time I like when I started the night, and then we've got the people on the like comedians that were on,
Yeah.
they all fit as well. It wasn't
Right.
like one guy's going to now talk about his battle with like mental health and
Hmm.
considering suicide to then be followed up by a comedy magician. It's just like, okay, cool. Yeah, just going to
Unless,
shift into that one.
unless the comedy magician busts out a noose from a top hat, I think there's like a
Yeah.
difference you can do there. But I think you're right. I think those spaces are extremely valuable, and I almost feel like
Yeah.
it's like a I was talking to who was talking to so recently on the podcast I had do you know Big D and the Kids Table, the band?
Yes.
Yes. So I had the lead singer of that
Yeah.
recently came on the podcast. We were talking about kind of this protective layer the rich have against other people
Yeah.
succeeding and all that kind of thing. And it kind of folded into another conversation I have with a friend, Mike Avi, who's a rapper, and we've been having this back and forth about how there aren't spaces, right?
Yeah.
And the spaces which there are controlled by either people, like you say, who are aging out of doing creative things
Yeah.
or have very specific things they want to demonstrate, right? It's very
Yeah.
like, here's this short film festival. These short films are all about these specific things.
Yeah.
So having an open space becomes extremely valuable, and it kind of runs in cycles of these spaces used to exist.
Yeah.
There used to be way more things to where you could just like, yeah, I'm going to go do a thing. It's run by these people. They're accepting. But they aged into being these closed off spaces over time. And you almost feel like there's, I don't know if you have this of like the back of my mind where I'm like, well, yeah, I could start one of these spaces, but who's going to listen to me start in this space? Right? Like, what
Yeah.
right do I have to set up this space compared to anyone else?
Yeah.
And how do I balance that to make it opening, but also not feel like I'm stroking my own ego by going, hey,
That's
now
the
come
tough
to my
thing.
night.
Yeah. Like mine's bad, it's great. But it's that
Yeah,
thing as well, you kind of mentioned like the like that kind of having the people have that space and then it starts to become like closed off.
yeah,
Like a lot of that is just due to the fact that, for instance, like with a comedy night,
mm,
if you want to have an open thing where it's like comedians come up and do it,
yeah,
but if you're getting like kind of guys who've just started, then some of them aren't going to be good.
yeah,
Some of them are going to be difficult. And then it's like, so if you have a night with eight comedians on,
mhm,
three of them were shit, it's like people are going to be like, I kind of enjoyed it, but I don't want to go there again.
yeah, yeah,
So it's like you have this weird thing of like you're trying to put out a stellar lineup of people that no one knows to do a night that means they'll come back,
yeah,
and it kind of like accidentally becomes closed off
yes,
because it's like I need people to keep coming to this so I can keep putting this out. But at
yeah,
the same time, like I mean, there was a few people like applied for it and stuff like that, and you watch their acts, and it's like the first joke is kind of like, yeah, like now I can identify as anything I want, and it's just like, oh fuck, like
yeah,
like I have to keep you off of this because it wouldn't
yeah,
work where it is. But at the same time, I don't want to like shit on you. Maybe this is just you trying to find
yeah,
your feet, and you're just trying to get into something, and at some point you'll hopefully find out that this is
mhm,
awful. But
yeah. It's an incredibly
yes,
fine line to walk. Like I'm literally thinking about this morning of I find it so funny of the amount of spaces which I'm in or have been like privy to which have the sign which is like everyone's welcome, right?
yeah,
Which is a great message, but it means something different to every single space,
yeah,
right? Everyone's welcome is fine unless you're a fucking Nazi, in which case, get
yeah,
out. Everyone's welcome, but they have a skin color in mind when they're thinking about that. And it's like
yeah,
it's hard to maintain neutrality in a space more than anything else. And
yeah.
that's a huge challenge. And it also means that when you are starting out, you go to these spaces, you don't know what to expect. You don't know why you'll be
No,
rejected or accepted in some cases.
no. I mean, I went to. There was one we went in. There was one of the comedians was wearing like skinny jeans,
Right.
and that was enough to elicit like people laughing on his way in. It's just kind of like, yeah, this is going to be tough because this is
Yeah.
not like it's an open space. Like they put
Yeah.
these people on and they have a comedy night, and that's great. But they have
Hmm.
no interest. Like just literally like
Yeah.
Like a guy in tight jeans is like, that's ridiculous.
It's absurd. This is he's
It's
a
mad that you do
surrealist
that.
comedian. What is this? It's interesting. Yeah. I guess I've never really thought about comedy nights in such depth in a
No, I
way.
didn't either because I was
Yeah.
always under the impression that it was like I don't know what you did, but it was almost like
Mm.
you never obviously you never see people doing like thing, but it was always in like comedy clubs.
Yeah.
So it's like you kept thinking like there must be a way into comedy clubs then. It's like or a
Yeah.
starting thing, but it's like you literally yeah, there's no way out. You have to either create a space to do it, which
Yeah.
is that we started doing, which has been really great. You know, like
What's the name of your space, by the way? Just as we shout
it's
it out.
canned meat comedy,
Canned Meat
which
Comedy.
is
There we go.
like that came out from it was a friend of mine who kept wanting to start a night.
Hmm.
And then he kept saying, I really want to start one because there's no spaces and stuff like that. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
like probably the same. And then I thought he was gonna ask me if I wanted to go in on it with him.
Hmm.
So I was kind of like, oh yeah, like maybe I could start a night as well. And he was just like, yeah, just. And then all he was asking was like, do you know if there's like a good place to hire lights? And I was like,
Right.
right. There's some reason I just thought, right, no, I like the excitement I felt in starting one.
Yeah.
I was just like, why am I not doing it then? Like that was the idea of someone's just going to come up to me and be like, hey, do you want to start thinking?
Yeah.
So there was like a pub near where we lived. It's like this that kind of thing of like as a space you really wanted.
Mhm.
Like I never saw where there wasn't comedy in there anyway.
Yeah.
It's like you go in, it's like I mean you've been to the Billy before, right?
Yeah.
Stanton.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like the perfect place for it.
Yeah.
There is a function room. There
Hmm.
is everything about it's weird.
Hmm.
There's like kind of everything, and it's not like trying to be weird for the sake of being weird. It literally
Yeah.
is like, oh, we put up stuff that made us laugh, and there's always kind of like art stuff going on there as well, and like
Yeah.
this really eclectic
Hmm.
group of people always turn up and do it. And I was always thought like that was the perfect place for it.
Yeah. I
So
think
it's been really, yeah,
I think maybe those are the spaces which we as a society need to lean on more, right?
yeah,
Right. I think over time we've managed to make these spaces like pubs and whatnot, which are like are a music venue,
yeah,
right? Fair enough. You're a music venue, but why can't you do another type of night? Why can't you
yeah.
put on like a thing in the day which does a thing, which is, expanding your audience for the music night?
It becomes that thing again where it's just like so many cuts to creative stuff.
Yeah.
It's like having a venue open longer means staffing it longer, lighting
Yeah.
longer, everything's difficult. It's like it becomes that. It kind of makes you worry for like smaller venues.
Yeah.
Which is obviously I'm not like breaking new ground by being like, hey, do you know they're shutting a lot of small venues? It's just like
We're not
really?
saying anything new when we suggest
Yeah,
creative industries are under pressure.
yeah, definitely. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like it becomes that thing where people only ever I don't know, it's like maybe there's like a different it just changes the way you have to do it. Like Martin's always sort of talking about you need to have like a social media presence,
Yeah.
which is one of those things of like I know like kind of semi not fighting because I do want to do it, but it's like doing it the way you want to do it.
Yes.
And it's like becoming a thing of like it's a nice space to do it in,
Hmm.
but then it's also like it becomes that thing of there's some people who just do stuff online that becomes like it'll blow up and
Yeah.
because it's like low in common denominator, or some of it's great as well.
Hmm.
Obviously, and I think it's like it's trying to find your feet like in a space that's like completely different from
Yeah.
what you're ever expecting. Like I post the occasional thing on social media, but I'm
Yeah.
like far from being able to like traverse that landscape.
Yeah, it's also like a bit of a mix on social media. I mean, this is an argument I have with Martin all the time about this is how we come to conflict as siblings is our approach to creative subjects.
Yeah,
He approaches it from kind of a marketing point of view of, you do that, you build a brand
yeah,
and that helps you build the audience, which is, yeah, I agree with that. It's the way to do it if you are a business.
yeah,
But when it comes to creation and things like that, I think of it as, well, you do the thing which you want to enjoy, you do the
yeah,
thing which you would want to watch and you would respond to, and you will get an audience who also respond to that over time.
yeah,
It just takes years and years longer to kind of build that relationship with your audience. But it's also a bit of a double-edged sword. Like I went to a comedy night in New York. The whole setup of this comedy night was it was a ridiculous story of a night to begin with anyway. But what it resulted in was me, two friends, four other people in a basement watching what must have been 12 comedians
Jesus.
in 30-minute snippets. So they'd come up, they'd do a brief set, they'd leave, and then out of nowhere, another comedian. And we were almost like held hostage in this situation. We were there for 2.5 hours. We were there just like sat, just like watching these things, like, this is gonna be the last guy, right? Like there wasn't like it was an open night. It was like we
Yeah,
paid a small fee to be there. I was like, okay, well, next one. This is got to be the last one. All just waiting for the headliner,
yeah,
who was someone I'd seen on social media, enjoyed the comedy of, and was like, this guy's got a pretty good following. This will be like a good night. Like it'd probably be a bit bigger
yeah.
audience because he's got like 100,000 followers or something. I was like, this will be pretty good. He bombed.
Really?
He was the last act. There was a group of, I was saying there's like 8, maybe 10 of us in this room. And it was like, yeah, this audience is tired because they've seen like so many
That's
acts.
the thing as well. Like that was a long time.
That's a long time. And the jokes he didn't land. And when they didn't land, he did exactly what you said was, oh, well, you guys just don't, maybe you're not
You
getting
don't
it.
fucking get it.
And I was
Yeah.
like, what the hell is this? Like you had this ego because you had the social media presence to think that
Yeah.
whatever you say on stage will appeal to everybody. And you just happen to get 8 people who don't think you're that funny now.
It's like that's the thing as well, because it can literally like that's what can happen. Like I've done a night where I did this material and it killed, and then I can go somewhere else that was like it's the same kind of thing. If it's not really set up for it, no one really wants to be there,
Yeah.
or it's like kind of people semi-wandered in, or it's just something
Yeah.
about it just doesn't work, or like the other acts that are on before it. I don't want to blame anyone else. It's like if it doesn't
No.
work, think of it. It's like it's weird because I've seen it work.
Yes.
Like I've
Yeah.
done gigs where it's like I was the best one on it.
Yeah.
And that's like by other comedians saying it, and like people coming up to me afterwards being like, "Oh, man, you're like my favorite." And it's like,
Yeah.
there's no reason to lie to me at that point, especially another comedian wouldn't lie to you to be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, you were better than me."
Yeah.
Like, guess what that fucking did to me? But it's like, then and then you go to a different night, and then there is like this factor where like there has been a few people that didn't make them laugh before, and then it's been on for
Yeah.
too long, and then people are like kind of semi-drunk at this point, and then you get on and you just get like maybe the odd laugh or just
Yeah.
not as much, and it's just like it's
Yeah.
so confusing, but it's like that's the point where he's clearly in the wrong thing, where it's like oh god, you guys just don't get me. But
Yeah.
it's like no, I need to figure something else out there. I need to work on perhaps
Yeah.
if this didn't work, you then start to riff off what's happening then.
Yeah. I need to
It
respond
was
to the
like that was
situation which I'm presented with,
yeah,
not just rely on the bucket of jokes, which I know
yeah,
work when it's like an audience who came specifically to see me, not an open mic situation,
yeah.
and grow from
No, it
that.
becomes that thing of like I started having to be like I started like hosting it a bit
Mm.
when I first started doing it, like emceeing it, where it's
Yeah.
kind of like it was just this thing of like I just wanted to go up and it kind of takes the pressure off
Mm.
because I'm not the one there to see.
Yeah.
It's just like I started it and I felt like it'd be too self-indulgent to just put myself on it,
Hmm.
like doing a set. So I just thought like I'll kind of host it and bring other people on, people who are
Yeah.
great, people who don't get enough time, people who are kind of like been in the same situation I've been in.
Yeah.
And it felt like it was the first time I just started doing things and like kind of riffing on what was happening and
Yeah.
like laughing and then just doing that. I thought like you need to be able to do both of these things. Like, you need to be
Mhm.
able to like I've got my jokes that work, but if they start bombing,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be able to like okay, but I need to be able to go somewhere from this. Because there's
Yeah.
nothing worse of like when I first thought like when I like that thing of like I first thought talked about where it's like you see a comedian who's got an act and it's like, oh my God, that's an act. Like
Yeah.
it's a set, like they have a routine.
Yeah.
It's like when a routine stops working, the fucking worst thing you can do is just carry on with it. Like it's gonna just suddenly get great.
Yeah, it's like give them 2 more minutes. They're gonna get it. They're gonna
Yeah.
get it, and they're suddenly
Like
gonna
they
be
hated
able to laugh at all the previous stuff.
yeah.
Like,
Like retrospectively, that was perfect. It's just like, but it's like if you just keep, it's like literally fucking digging, funneling your
yeah.
way into this like grave. Of, like they're not finding this funny. Like you need to figure something else out, or like change the way you're approaching it. The idea of being like, I'm just going to stay like this.
Yeah.
Where it's like if you were angry in that moment, and it's like these people are starting to be like uncomfortable. It's
Yeah.
like you have two options to like push further or like pull it back, but you don't just do the same kind of pace where it's like this is the thing they're not liking.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to carry on with it.
You really have to kind of like bend to the will of the audience, and yeah, like I think if there's like a message to this of like starting out, it's very much it's always gonna be difficult, right?
Yeah,
Like there's no way to make this process easy.
No.
because you could have like I've recently talking about you can have like 50 comedy nights. Like you could have 50 open mic nights in a city, but some of them are going to be bad,
Yeah.
and you're going to have to experience the bad. And you can't, like you say, you kind of have to be multifaceted. You can't rely on one thing or another. You can't hone your
Yeah.
act to be perfect, and you can't just do crowd work
Yeah.
because the crowd may not be there for that view.
Yeah.
And then you also can't rely on just the social media aspect of it. You just reminded
No.
me, I went to a music show recently, and there was a guy who was the biggest self-promoter I've ever seen in my life. And it was amazing to the point of absurdity. He had like you do like an air horn during a music set if you're like a
Yeah.
DJ or whatever. He had one of those, but it shouted out his own name and told him he was a genius. He was live streaming the event, and there was built-in applause to his soundtrack, which meant anyone on the live stream thought he was playing to a massive
Oh,
crowd.
fuck.
And I was like, this is almost like this is diabolically genius of my
Yeah.
one sense, but also like he wasn't bad, but my God, man.
It's also the thing of like that's the thing of like if you really wanted to like prepare for comedy, like that's
Yeah,
what you'd have to do. You'd have
yeah,
to fake all this stuff to be kind of like look like you're doing it. It's like
yeah,
it's the thing of well you mentioned like what's like anyone starting, like it's horrible, but you need to just find your feet and do it. And it's the thing you just be comfortable with is like learning to bomb.
hmm
Like you're gonna bomb. It's something about it. You can't control every factor of it. I mean, I did a gig in Sherwood, and it's a really nice place, and it's
mm,
usually pretty great. There was a drag act on before,
right,
or like I was going to be on that night, and there's a group of people got like were like just they're just wasted on like
right,
a Tuesday, and they started giving them some shit.
right.
At which point, like another comedian got involved and stuff. I actually missed all of this when I was outside having a cigarette. So I came back into
They were
like the atmosphere
hostile.
of like literally came back into possibly the most uncomfortable atmosphere I've ever done in my life.
Yeah,
And I was on fucking first. So it's just like I got on and it was just kind of like talking. I was just looking around like, why does everyone look so uncomfortable?
mm,
And it was kind of like they could tell there was just like this air of that wasn't very pleasant what we just watched, but we're just gonna laugh at this now.
yeah,
And then it was just kind of like, do you say you're gonna bomb? You're always gonna have things. You're gonna be trying new things.
hmm
Like if you try a new joke that doesn't work, it's gonna suck. It's got thing of like with any sort of art, like the first song you write, shit. But like I kind of mentioned, it's always worse when a joke bombs because it's like it's just not the thing.
yes,
But it's just like yeah, it's gonna like it's learn to bomb. Realistically, the best advice you can give to anyone trying to get into comedy is practice a shitload of self-help. Like read about, I mean,
hmm
like whatever kind of thing gets you through a trauma or a
hmm
difficulty. Like, I mean, I saw spoke to comedians actually, like he's like playing theaters and stuff now. Like he's can I get talking to them like because it's such a welcoming community as well. Like he gave me so much advice. There's a guy called
yeah,
Matt Bragg, who everyone should look up. He's great. He was giving us advice. He said like my main thing was like just keep doing it, go around, don't stop. Like
hmm
you have to go to open mic nights where there's musicians on, and then you're going to start doing comedy, and no one wants to see it. You have to be in pubs where people have just wandered in, or this is their local, and someone's stuck on a comedy night, and it's not going to work there. You could be on the first night that it's just not going to work. No one wants to see this.
yeah,
You also have to be kind of like he said, like if you read a lot about stoicism, that thing of like if you see if you can just leave and not internalize the awful thing that just happened where no one laughed at your dream.
yeah,
Like doing that's like I think like I had it where it's like I learned to like how do I control anxiety. So it's like
hmm
that's the main thing. I started, running more, exercising. I wouldn't drink before I went on stage. I if I did drink, it was like a chamomile tea or something
yeah,
really like settle my stomach. It's like the least rock and roll preparation to
yeah,
anything. Yeah, it's that kind of thing of like the any advice is just like find what you want to do
yeah,
and then figure out a way you're gonna do it. If that makes sense. Where it's
yeah,
literally like you need to if you're gonna be that weird comedian that does this, you need to find out why you think it's funny and then push
hmm
that out and then do that. As opposed
yeah.
to like don't try and do something because someone said like, oh, it'd be funny if you do this weird thing. It's like I don't believe you, but I'll do it anyway.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and I think as well, like, I think you're kind of like an inspiring example, Kieran, of if you're setting up anything to start out, you got to keep trying, right?
Yeah.
You got to find a way to manage the parts which make you afraid when you're going in to do the thing, and there is no like I think I almost feel like there's a like an underlying guilt of when you set up new things because, like you say, there's an established way of doing things, and there's existing venues and all these kind of things.
Yeah,
But having another space is extremely valuable, especially right now.
yeah,
Having an open
definitely.
space is extremely valuable. So maybe having that investment as much in the thing which you enjoy as much as your own act
Yeah,
becomes increasingly valuable to you, but also to
yeah.
community and
No,
to
it's
people around you.
lovely. And I mean, like you meet like I've met loads of great comedians through it as well, and it's like that
Mm,
thing of you start to meet people who kind of share your thing. Like
yeah.
my favorite show I ever did was when is one that we set up, and there was like a few people I wanted to get on it, and all of them were lucky enough to be like kind of, oh yeah, I'm not lucky for them, but like lucky for me. There's like all of them
Yeah,
were like,
yeah.
oh, I'm free that day. Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
love to
yeah.
turn up. And then you're on this show where like everyone fits in with what they're doing, and there's different acts from like completely varying spectrums. Like one person had puppets, who was like, for some reason I just love the fact there's someone who
Yeah.
goes on stage with like a full puppet setup, and it's actually like quite funny and weird. And then there's like someone else who is just guys who like are great at it, but they don't get the time to do it. And then there's
Yeah.
always just like something about it was like went really, yeah, it was just great. It's like great
Yeah.
to have like that on, and like that's really my favorite thing from it. So
That's good. And I think that's a great message to kind of lead this forward with, set up these
yeah,
spaces, meet the right people,
set
and
up set up a space, find the weirdos, fill them, put them in your thing,
yeah,
and just wait for people to turn up. And it's gonna be fucking awful waiting, but they do.
yes,
That's
yes.
the thing.
The wait is the hard part.
Yeah,
In some ways, the wait is the hard part. But I think that's a very good point to kind of bring this to a head on. Um,
yeah,
but I do have a couple of questions to end this
yes.
out, which you may or may not be aware of, depending on whether you listen to the podcast before, Kieran.
There's just a few of them, but
But I change it each year, so
yeah,
So to round this out, I've been asking guests this year for a
yeah,
simple question. It doesn't have to be related to the topic at hand.
yeah.
What is some great advice?
I think my favorite bit of advice was, and it does kind of neatly lead on to everything I've said to me, is a Bukowski quote that said, "Find what you love and let it kill you." And it's just something about that's the thing that would describe anything I've ever enjoyed, where it's like find the woman you love and die with her. Like find the job you want to do or like the creative thing you want to do, and let that slowly grind you down to the point of like doing it where you have to get something out of it. But yeah, find what you love and let it kill you. That'd be my best advice.
That's some extremely solid advice. And yeah, something I completely agree with. Find the thing which makes you feel alive, and then that will be the thing which kills you. But you're
Yeah,
that
100%.
happy and
You're that
cathartic.
great. It'll be
Yeah,
great.
yeah, definitely. Okay. And in which case, there's a final question, which is
Yeah,
obviously I invite anyone on this podcast because we are an open space. But who should I speak to next?
that's great actually.
Open space.
I know. Open space.
Doesn't
If
have
you
to be a
get a
comedian.
chance, try and speak to anyone who wrestles because I think they're great.
Do you have
Deeply
someone in
wonderful,
mind?
poetic people. No, but I remember I was watching someone once, and someone said, "Had you prepared to be a wrestler?" And his
Right.
quote was, "Have your heart broken?" I was sort of thinking, like, I'm going to talk to that dude all the time.
That is amazing advice. I do need a name though, Karen. I need a name.
uh,
Big or
sh-
small, I can always try and reach out. I tried to get Danhausening
anyone.
and it didn't work.
I'd say Chet Hanks.
Chet Hanks. Chet
If you were
Hanks?
going to approach anyone, my
Okay.
dream is to see you specifically talking to Chet Hanks.
Next week is Chad. I would
Yeah,
try to make it happen. Why not?
I, if I see that in like a month's time, I die a very happy man.
We've got to go out and find the weirdos. So I'm trying to find the weirdos.
Yeah,
If we can make this
that's the
happen,
dude.
this is the way to do it, right? So
Yeah,
yeah. All right, man. Well, it's been fantastic to speak to you. I think
this has been a pleasure.
I'm glad it was. Hopefully not too stressful. I think we've given good insight into the pride and pitfalls of trying to start out in comedy.
Yeah, the idea of monetizing a dream.
Monetize a dream. That's
Yeah,
what society was built for, apparently.
yeah.
But as we're learning as we go along. But on that note, yeah, that's it. It's been great to catch up with you, and we will talk to
Been
these guys
lovely.
later. Thank you for
Bye,
coming, Kira.
everyone. Like signing off
I'll
like a
stop. I'll stop.
children's show.
No, I'll stop recording.